Charlie, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Art of Fulfilment podcast. Really glad you're here with us today. How you doing?
Thank you, mate. It's an absolute honor.
So, for those that don't know who you are, Charlie, would you mind like just sharing a bit about your journey into fitness coaching? What inspired you to sort of specialize with working with everyday athletes?
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. So, I guess you could say I'm a failed athlete, um, yeah, as many coaches are. No, I played sport when I was growing up, um, primarily rugby, um, and obviously like found enjoyment in going to the gym, um, and then sort of really just through my own enjoyment of going to the gym and the benefits I got from it. That led me sort of down the route of coaching other people. And obviously it's an extremely rewarding and satisfying career. And I haven't really looked back since. But I think really what got me into it was having some really influential coaches in my life, particularly when I was in my sort of like adolescent period. So when I was younger, one coach in particular, Mark Robinson, real character. Um, he big Kiwi dude. He was anyone that played rugby with me at that time will know Mark. He's yeah, he was a real influential character to a lot of the lads that I played with. Somehow, like I mean, he coached at a really high level. Somehow found himself sort of coaching Barking Rugby Club. But he sort of set up two academies, one at my school, luckily enough, Robert Clack, and um, one at Barking. And it was the first time sort of like somebody had really taken me under their wing, um, as he did with a lot of us, and he really made you feel like an athlete. And so that was sort of like my first experience of actually sort of being treated like an athlete, um, sort of following uh, a well structured program, um, being held accountable, and that sort of I guess that was the first time I'd experienced having a coach, and
Mm.
obviously re-experiencing what that did for me. I mean, it literally transformed my life. Like it really did. It set me on the trajectory that I'm on now. Um, but yeah, it really did change my life. I mean, I had a few sort of like health problems when I was younger, which set me back physically and sort of academically, just because I spent a lot of time out of school and
Mm.
through changing my lifestyle, my nutrition, and taking training seriously. Um, it really did. Well, yeah, like I said, transformed my life. My health had improved. Um, I improved academically. It gave me structure, gave me a sense of purpose. And then I realized when I did start coaching, I can obviously offer that to, for other people. So really that's sort of like what sent me on, this career path as a coach.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So having that mentor really sort of guided you on that path, and just having that person to, yeah, to guide you along the way, is a really pivotal part in your career as well now, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So you a part of your part of your approach to coaching is that you say that you coach everyday athletes. What do you think sort of separates an everyday athlete from a professional one, and sort of how does that impact your coaching approach? As I assume, probably an everyday athlete's not going to be training, 7 times a week and having, the most outrageous nutrition coaches are all on working for them. So yeah, be interested to know sort of what that difference is.
Yeah. So like obviously you're a professional athlete or you competitive athlete. Um, they've, like you said, they've got the luxury of having a coaching staff supporting them. Um, and their approach to training, nutrition, lifestyle is going to be centered around their competition calendar, and the physical demands of their sport.
Mm.
Whereas your everyday athlete, I guess that could be defined as anyone who identifies themselves as an athlete. They enjoy training, they enjoy pushing their body, um, but they've got other roles and responsibilities outside of their physical goals, that need to be taken into consideration. And so their approach to training, nutrition, and lifestyle is going to be centered around the constraints of their life. So their work schedule, if they're a parent, their time constraints, their budget, all of that. So all of that needs to be taken into account, and their approach to training, especially, has to complement the rest of their life.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, when you say about sort of the constraints around time, I recall seeing some of your Instagram stories of some of your clients. I think it was a client who was working on a building site, and he was just doing, yeah, like squats and lunges with things that are around like probably like 5:30 in the morning, and you just think that really is the everyday athlete. You're taking what is a really difficult, position. I'll probably think, oh, well, I'm working all day on my feet as well. I probably won't do those sort of formal exercises, but they've gone above and beyond. So I suppose that's a testament to, the sort of mentorship that you're providing them as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess the values of an athlete, and I guess, well, someone that we would call an everyday athlete, are pretty similar. They prioritize their health and their fitness. And so they will make time to train in. They will make time to, you know, optimize their nutrition as much as they can. Um, but you've got to obviously do it with the time and the resources that you've got available. And so, yeah, the client that you mentioned there, in fact, I was coaching him this morning. He was my
Oh,
7
right.
a.m. client. Um,
There you go.
he's fantastic. And he's always found time to train, 2 or 3 times a week. Um, Regardless of how busy his schedule is. I mean, he's also a parent. He's got an extremely demanding job as a builder, but he'll always make time to do an hour's training, 2 or 3 days a week. And he does what he can outside of training to ensure that he can continue, pushing progress forward as much as he can.
Mm,
So if
yeah,
that means, like
yeah,
preparing meals to take to work, um, like obviously trying to get his head down, as early as he can, even with, like,
yeah,
a kid and and other responsibilities outside of that are extremely time consuming. Um, but obviously you have to set realistic expectations based upon the time and resources that you have available.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. So I suppose as part of your onboarding process, you sort of identify where, what are the time constraints, or what is the sort of current reality. That because if you just start saying, right, we're going to start training 6 times a week, and you'd be like, okay, well, this is too much for me right now.
It's actually me that ends up having to sort of like pull people back, um,
Mm.
and set
Oh,
more
okay, that's
realistic
interesting.
expectations. So they'll come to me and say, I want to train 6 days a week. Um,
Yeah,
And then when we actually, do a needs analysis, when we look at um, their, their work schedule and their life, I'm like, well, how realistic is that? Are you able to sustain that for, a long enough period of time, to really see, consistent progress? Um, and when, obviously when we have that conversation, we'll try to find an approach that's maybe a little bit more realistic and more sustainable.
yeah. I suppose that's a very sensible approach, and I think I had a question in my mind as I was thinking about that. Is because like many people will hit plateaus in their fitness journey. I think obviously the New Year goal of setting in January of like, right, I'm going to absolutely smash it, and then we just start to sort of it just fizzles out. So like, what are some of the common reasons for this, and maybe like how can they break through and keep that momentum?
Yeah. I mean, plateaus occur for a number of reasons. And it's, yeah, I guess, I mean, there are so many different directions that we could take this conversation, but they're going to be logistical. So it could be that they've had a change in circumstances, which means that they can't prioritize training as much as they could when they, sort of like when they were maybe at the beginning of the year when they had a little bit more time on their hands. Work was a little bit quieter. Um, as we approach, let's use the sort of annual calendar as an example. As we approach the summer, we've got things like, weddings, maybe birthday parties and that sort of thing. There are more social events that sort of get placed in our calendar, in the summer. And so therefore training might have to take a backseat. And so you have to sort of like consider all of those logistical, considerations. Um, but in the ideal world, I think people experience a plateau because they get bored, and they lose motivation.
Mm,
So, and that, you know, their approach to training doesn't evolve as their body evolves. So, are you doing enough training to continue sort of seeing progress? Has your training program gone a little bit stale? Um, and if so, what what needs to change in order to keep progress moving forward? Do you need to do a little bit more work? Do you actually need to? So a lot of the time it's not more. It's, are you doing what you're currently doing better? So more doesn't
mm,
always mean better. Like better means better, if that makes sense.
mm. So are you saying that it's like a case of, because like there's principles of like progressive overload and these sort of things. Is it trying to do the same exercise but in a better form? Is that how you're saying it, or is it, or
Yeah. I
adapting
guess
that?
it's a difficult
What's
conversation to have because there's no
yeah,
context around it. It
yeah,
depends on what they're doing and yeah, what problems um, they run into. Um,
mm,
but yeah, I think like you say, if you can focus on the the principles rather than the methods, I guess that's something that I can speak to. I think people get far too caught up on specific methods and strategies without understanding the underlying principles that make those um, methods and strategies effective.
mm,
So, for instance, if they're following a specific diet or a set of which are essentially a set of instructions or a set of rules. Let's say like intermittent fasting. That's a really common, um, I guess, diet strategy that somebody might use to lose weight or to shed a few pounds. Um, that works based upon the premise that you're adding a constraint that is going to enable you to eat fewer calories and therefore put you in a calorie deficit. If you don't
mm,
understand that that is the principle by which it works, then you can um, be successful in, like achieving the method. So you're adhering to the method, but if you're still overeating calories within that window of time that you get to eat, then you're violating the principle of energy
mm.
balance. So you have to understand the principles that are underlying the methods that you're using to achieve a certain outcome.
And that's sort of, so like I suppose going back to first principles, as you say, is just like really understanding what underpins all the different strategies. Because there's many ways to that
Yeah.
outcome or that goal. What do you think is sort of one of one training principle that is maybe most people overlook, that will make a huge difference to their performance?
Yeah, I think something that I think is often misunderstood is you mentioned it earlier, the principle of progressive overload. They feel
Mm,
like they have to do more than they did in their previous session in order to make progress, when that's actually backwards. You will be
mm,
able to do more. So let's use, so that we can, like give that some context. Um, Say in the context of strength training, people feel like they've got to add more weight to the bar every week in order to make progress. You
mm,
will be able to add more weight to the bar when you are strong enough. So as long as you go
mm,
into the gym and you consistently provide your body with an appropriate stimulus in order for it to grow and get stronger, um, eventually you will be able to add weight to the bar. Does that make sense? So you're trying to create an
yeah.
environment whereby your body can get stronger and output more force,
Hmm. Hmm.
but you can't put the cart before the horse.
Yeah. No, that makes entire sense. So I suppose, obviously, the part of clients feeling successful was probably the idea that, like, yeah, I can lift more weight, or but it's a very sort of it's a slow burning process sometimes. I think if you first start going back into the gym, you can see quite good gains relatively quickly. You can kind of like, if you haven't used your muscles in a while, it's like, oh, got a bit of a pump, and
Yeah,
seen some
you
good
can
good
you can.
things, but it takes years, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it does take years, and I mean we often call those like newbie gains. So if you,
Yeah.
like if you do something that you've never done before, then like I'll always use like the analogy of like learning to drive. It's like you've never driven a car before, but when you rock up to your first driving lesson, everything you do is progress. Like literally just sitting in the driver's seat and putting the keys in the ignition is progress. You know what I mean? Because you've never done it before. Just like,
Yeah.
pulling out your driveway is progress. But obviously the
Yeah.
longer you do something, um, uh, the harder it is to make those marginal gains in progress.
Mm.
The
Mm.
more you advance. So progress inevitably slows down. The more you sort of like, yeah, the more advanced you get. Um, and you have to expect that. Like you can't, and I think people kid themselves because when they first go to the gym, again, we'll use strength training as just because it's a very easy, thing to sort of like speak to. When you first go to the gym, you're, all you're doing is learning the exercises. So you might have you might be following a program, with a certain set of exercises. All you're doing is just getting better at those exercises. And so
Mm.
it sort of gives the illusion that you're getting stronger. You're not, you're just getting better at the exercises. You're just, like you're, that's all. You're just learning the movements. It isn't until you sort of reach or get much closer to your strength potential that you actually, that's when the real work begins. That's when you have to really sort of like dig deep, be consistent, um, and start to develop all of those underlying qualities that are then going to enable you to become stronger.
Yeah. I suppose that's a part of, yeah, the benefits of having someone like yourself, like strength and conditioning coach or fitness coach, to be able to constantly monitor that, because it is a bit of a minefield. You can, pull these different things off the apps and things like that, but unless you've got someone monitoring and knowing those specific things, and even just the way that you're actually lifting, seeing the form, it's quite hard to potentially optimize. And I think one thing, sort of, as you said that about, it gets to a point. It reminds me of it's called like the point of diminishing returns. Like at some point, it's
That's
sort
it.
of just, yeah. The higher you are, then the harder it is to, optimize that point. So you've got to think creatively around that.
That's it. And the thing is, like, everything works to a certain degree. But
Yeah.
ultimately you are going to reach a point of diminishing returns. Like the body is going to adapt to the type and the volume of training that you're doing. And therefore something has to evolve, has to change over time in order for you to continue making progress. But you want to that doesn't mean that you constantly sort of like just randomly make changes to your approach. Um, you have to try to identify what the bottleneck is, and then
Mm.
you make small tweaks to what you're doing in order to, like fix those gaps or fix those leaks in the system.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I suppose something that I'm thinking of is like, how do you balance pushing clients towards this sort of peak performance that we're aiming for, but whilst preventing, the burnout and the injury?
I guess it's a few things. Like if you hire a coach, you've got somebody that's there holding you accountable. So they act as a bit of a sounding board. If you run into any obstacles, they can offer you, a different perspective. Whether that's um, it could be maybe a psychological barrier. They might have
Mm.
some, like self-limiting beliefs that you can help them overcome. It could be a logistical issue. So maybe their work schedules change and they're now a little bit more, pressed for time. And so you have to make some adjustments to their training program so that they can continue, making progress without, um, within the time constraints that they're working under. Um, it could be that they run into a little bit of an injury or that they've picked up a couple of niggles that you need to sort of like work around. So you might need to adjust their exercise program to work around those. So yeah, having a coach that's maybe like gone down that path, a number of times, they've helped other people overcome those obstacles and can obviously help you overcome problems and provide solutions to those problems. But secondly, it's helping people stay on track by holding them accountable and
Mm.
just reminding them what their goals and their values are. Because
Yeah.
like it's really difficult for any of us to sort of, like see or keep in mind the bigger picture. We often lose sight of our goals. Um, so we might set this sort of like, audacious goal, long-term audacious goal, but as things start to get harder, or you're not, or like as we mentioned before, like progress starts to slow down, which it inevitably will at some point. You can often sort of like lose motivation, feel a bit deflated, um, and you lose sight of the bigger picture. Um, and I think having like the value of having a coach is that they can um, help you sort of like navigate those, those both periods and help you find solutions.
I'd love to. Yeah, I want to come on to mindset because I think it just does play such a big role within everything, really. I mean, something that I've sort of come across is like, the only belief that matters is that you can get better at something. Because, if you don't even believe that, then you're not going to take those actions. You're not going to do align those behaviors and your values towards doing something.
Mhm.
I wanted to come on to that, but talking about like burnout and injury, one of our members, Jason, he's a pastoral lead in a primary school. He actually wants to know, he wants to invite parents and carers into sort of like a fitness session to sort of improve that sort of parental engagement. What do you think? What like sort of maybe some exercises, simple introductory exercises that you would recommend for maybe parents that haven't been mobile in a while, haven't maybe formally exercised, and they're just maybe thinking about maybe starting their journey, and just thinking about ways that would make them feel like they've done a good session, but equally not going to be aching so much that they won't want to ever do it again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that part comes down to just like managing the overall amount of stress that you place on them during that session. So just make sure that
Mm,
they don't do too much too soon. Um, but really, like any exercise that piques their interest, anything that they're going to enjoy. Um, I mean, like you've got a series of like movement patterns, I guess, that you can train. Um, so you've got like locomotion, which is basically, like running, walking, um, yeah, anything basically where you're moving from A to B. You've got a squat, and that could be any variation of squat. I would start them off if you're going to add load. Something like a goblet squat is really easy to learn, where you hold the weight in the front of your chest.
mhm.
That just puts you into a nice, position to perform a, really well executed squat. Some type of hip hinge. So something where you're sort of hinging at the hips or bending at the hips more so than you are your knees, and try to keep your back in a relatively neutral position. Um, you've got a lunge or a split squat pattern. So that's just where you've got 1 foot forward, 1 foot back, and you're performing some type of lunge. Um, you've got upper body pressing exercises, and obviously you can press sort of horizontally, vertically, and upper body pulling exercises. So you're pulling something towards you, or you're pulling your body towards something horizontally or vertically. Um, and yeah, just start with that. So you've got like a series of different movement patterns there, but there are a number of different exercises that are going to fit within those categories of movement. So like I said, goblet squat is a fantastic variation that's easy to learn. You've got something like a Romanian deadlift. If any of your listeners are unfamiliar with these exercises, just type in on Google and you'll see a demonstration. But uh, yeah, that would be an example of a hip hinge. Push up would be like a horizontal pushing exercise. Um, yeah, pull up would be like a vertical pulling exercise, etc. Um, so yeah, there are a number of exercises that you can do. It depends on the equipment that you've got available, but
Mhm.
if you're working with bands, you can add a little bit of resistance that way, and you can always scale these exercises back to sort of like match the ability of the individual that you've got in front of you.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, that'll be really nice to see that, and I'll let you know how that goes. Um, so coming on to sort of mindset and motivation, no doubt, there's going to be obstacles in the way. What are some of your sort of strategies or ways that you help your clients stay motivated, especially when progress feels slow or life gets in the way?
Yeah, I guess it's sort of like understanding the root cause of why they're losing motivation. Um,
Mm,
to be honest, you rarely experience that. If you have hired a coach, um, you'll rarely lose motivation because every step of the way they're going to be sort of explaining what the intent is behind what you're doing. So
Mm.
every time like you're going to the gym, there's going to be a very clear intention for that workout. And so if you go to the gym, you've got a plan that you can follow. Um, you've got, and that plan is sort of like centered around a specific goal. So you walk into the gym and you're actually training with purpose, and you're making progress. Then you're not going to lose motivation. Yeah, in
Mm.
order to be motivated, first and foremost, you need a motive. Like you need a reason to train. So you have to
Yeah.
clearly define like why you're doing what you're doing. Like, why are you going to the gym? What do you want to get out of today's workout? And if you
Mm.
understand that, then you're going to be a lot more motivated to go.
Yeah.
And then
I
obviously,
think,
if you've
yeah,
got on
that's,
top of that, if you've got a plan that you trust and you've got confidence in, then yeah, you're even more likely to go and actually enjoy training and get something from it.
I think that's really important to think about is, that, I mean, that's a big part of what, I do with my clients in the community is like really creating that initial why. So like the first thing, sort of crafting the mission behind it. And I think something for me in fitness. So I used to play a lot of sports. And I used to enjoy the fitness a lot more when there was like, because you're trying to get better for the team and you want to get good at that. Um, Whereas I suppose like the fitness element, unless you're potentially doing it for a competition, like a high rocks or whatever, um, it is kind of like you versus you. And it's like you want to just, it's trying to find that motivation and why is maybe a bit more, you really sort of drill deeper into that, or, maybe it's a physique that you want to change or the performance or even just sort of self-confidence and self-esteem and sort of athletic
Yeah.
abilities.
I
Do
normally bring
you
it back
like,
to,
go on,
sorry, mate.
sorry.
I normally bring it back to what type of person do you want to become?
Mm,
As opposed to just like the
mm,
objective goals that we're trying to meet. Um, they should reflect the type of person that you want to become. So like,
mm.
are you, um, are your actions aligned with your values, essentially? So regardless of whether you're seeing objective progress or not, you need to be someone who values, working hard, going up and, you know, putting in as much effort as you can, given the time and the resources that you have available. So I think that
I think
often
that's
sort of
really,
like that keeps
yeah,
you motivated. If you want to become that type of person that put, um, like your health and your fitness, first, then you will show up and you will do the work.
yeah. There's I can't remember. I think it's Dr. Kelly McGonigal. Um, there's some research that's sort of looking into how like how exercises themselves, even different types of exercises, can have different effects on your psychology. So it's like if you're a runner, you'll have like obviously an endurance sort of style sport. You have that sort of resilience and longevity around these things. And like by lifting strong weights, if you're in sort of the strength or power competitions, you have, very sort of, strong stoic psychological, responses to those. So I think even if you're not doing it for a specific like objective outcome or a goal, there is also that you're going to get that sort of psychological mindset, you know, loop that's going to come back from just doing hard things.
It has to become part of who you are. It has to be like a big, big part of your identity. You're
Mm,
somebody who, yeah, you have to make training like a part of your life. It's a non-negotiable. Um, and it's sort of, it's very closely tied to your values.
mm,
It's, we often like, sure you've sort of, like heard the analogy of like somebody who's trying to quit smoking. If somebody asks if they want a cigarette, as opposed to answering, oh no, I'm trying to quit smoking, just say, no, I don't smoke.
yeah.
Because then now you're identifying, as somebody who does not smoke. I am a non-smoker, and you're far more likely to succeed if you make it part of your identity. And so it's the same with
Yeah.
fitness. Like I am somebody who trains hard several days a week. That is what I do. that's a non-negotiable part of my life.
Yeah, I'm the type of person that does fill in the
Yeah.
blank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not just like,
S
and if you are experiencing a bit of like a plateau in your training, because people fall into this trap as well, it becomes habitual. So they just, they show up, they go to the gym several days a week, but it because it's such a consistent sort of part of their weekly routine, again, it just becomes habitual, and they no longer show up. They're no longer present when they're there. Then they're no longer trying to maybe optimize how they execute their exercises. They're not trying to make sort of like small adjustments to their program to ensure that progress continues moving forward. Um, they just show up and go through the motions. And so if you're
Yeah.
just consistently showing up and going through the motions, then you're developing the habit of just consistently showing up and going through the motions. You have to develop the habit of showing up and training with intent. You're there to get better. And so you have to constantly pick holes in how you perform, and make that a habit.
It's that Aristotle quote, isn't it? It's you are what you repeatedly do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just so we talked about mindset, we talked about, the sort of approaches to, athletic performance. We're going to dive into the minefield that is nutrition. I know this is a big one. It's going to be a whole podcast in itself, but
Oh yeah.
what is your take on nutrition and performance? Like, is there any common myths that you'd like to debunk that would be helpful
I mean,
for our audience? Not to put you on the
that's
spot, mate, but
there are too many. I'll tell you what, you give me one and I'll give you my take on it.
that's interesting. Okay, carnivore diet.
Carnivore diet. Okay. Yeah. The carnivore diet was born out of, sort of, it was kind of an elimination diet for people who suffer from, um, autoimmune diseases, or they've got food intolerances. And so by cutting out, a lot of plant-based food from their diet, they were able to, identify what might be causing, flare-ups and symptoms. Um, and it's a very viable way if you do sort of like experience those sorts of, symptoms or inflammatory symptoms. It can be a very viable way to sort of like identify any sensitivities or intolerances. Um, it's a tool that can be used and is very effective if it's used within the right context. But um, you, used outside of that context, it you know it it can have some adverse effects. Put it that way, some adverse sort of like health implications. Because you're going to be missing out if you're not intolerant to, you know, vegetables and different fruits and that sort of thing. Then you're missing out on a lot of benefits that those foods could be, providing you. You're missing out on a lot of, potential nutrients. The only reason I would consider cutting out an entire food group is if you are genuinely intolerant to it.
Mm.
So there are no, I think one of the biggest sort of misconceptions is that there are good or like inherently good or bad foods. There are no sort of like foods that are inherently good or bad. There are just more appropriate foods for you and your sort of like individual goals and ability to sort of digest that food. I often use the example of, let's say like a bowl of Cocoa Pops. Okay. Like most people would say, oh, that's unhealthy. Okay. So
Mm.
yeah, of course, if you're somebody that's, relatively overweight, maybe pre-diabetic, it's probably not the best option for you to have as a breakfast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's hyper palatable, very high in simple carbohydrates. Um, so you're more likely to overeat calories. Um, but then for all of the same reasons, it's a great option for an athlete that's just finished a really intense training session that needs to replenish their glycogen levels.
Mm.
It's like if they've got an extremely high demand for calories, like it's very easy to eat, so it digests really well. It's high in sugar, so it's going to replenish their glycogen, quickly. It's low in fiber, um, so it's going to sort of like be absorbed much easier than say like whole foods. So in some
Yeah.
cases, like highly processed foods can be really beneficial if they're used at the right time by the right person. Um, So yeah, that's just sort of like one example
That's
when, we would label a food as bad, but in some contexts it's actually better.
yeah, that's really interesting. I think sort of going down the labeling of foods as bad and good is also a bit harmful in the sort of that vocabulary around those sort of things, because then it goes down the whole sort of the path of shaming for certain eating certain foods and things like that. Yeah, so that's really, I think, helpful to know, and maybe thinking about, yeah, what type of person you are, and is this optimal for me at this stage of you know
Exactly, like what
my
am I
health.
trying to achieve? Like a lot of people will poo-poo foods that are like low in fat or have had the fat, sort of like poo-poo sort of low fat yogurts or not like non-fat yogurt. Now, like, are they just replacing all of the fat with sugar and sweeteners and that sort of thing? But if you're somebody that's trying to eat a calorie controlled diet because you're trying to improve your body composition and lose weight, then low fat options are a great alternative because they help you achieve that goal of being in a calorie deficit.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like, so that they're a good option. So, I mean, I understand that sort of like using like olive oil and butter, like they're very healthy sources of fat. And using
yeah.
them with that is fine. But then again, if you're trying to eat a calorie controlled diet because your goal is to lose weight, then using something like the 1 calorie spray to cook with
Oh yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
probably a much better option because it's sort of like it then you can then save those calories for like obviously other foods that are going to be a little bit more filling.
Mm,
So that they keep you a little bit more satiated, and yeah, they help you control your appetite. Um, and so yeah, although yeah, again, like fat is essential, it's an essential nutrient. If you're trying to sort of like lower your overall calorie intake, then choosing lower fat options is probably a good strategy.
awesome. Okay, that's really helpful. That's really helpful to know.
But, sorry, I'm going
So
to harp on that again. Just one more point. I just want to
go on, yeah.
provide the alternative. If you're, let's say, somebody who's extremely active and you're trying to eat
Mm,
more calories because you've got a much higher energy demand, then the opposite's going to be true. Then,
mm,
try like actually trying to eat, like trying to find ways that you can easily add more calories to your daily intake is going to be is a helpful strategy. So just try, so you might end up cooking with, something like butter just to sort of like, just to include more calories in your diet. If you're somebody that's trying to maybe gain weight, or again, you've just got a much higher demand for calories. So then
mm,
therefore you might need to use strategies like eating foods that are much easier to digest, um, that aren't going to keep you full for a long period of time so that you can eat more food. Um, Whereas again, if you're trying
yeah,
to lose weight, it's going to be the opposite. You want to eat foods that are far more satiating, so you can control your appetite and maintain a calorie deficit without feeling hungry. So yeah, it's
that
sort of like
yeah,
that's why you have to define your goal first. Like, what is your goal? What are you trying to achieve at this particular moment in time? And then you choose strategies based upon your goal, and the constraints that you're working under, like your work schedule, your lifestyle, your food preferences. So some people don't, like something like a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet might be a good strategy for somebody that really enjoys eating a high fat intake of food.
mm,
Like they really enjoy fatty foods like avocados and, like fatty cuts of steak and that sort of thing. That might be a much easier diet for them to adhere to because it permits those foods and enables them to maintain a calorie deficit if they're doing it, if they're doing it right. Um, Whereas somebody that maybe prefers to eat more carbohydrates, maybe they need to lower their fat intake so that they can afford to eat more carbohydrates and maintain a calorie deficit. Does that make sense? So
that's
yeah,
really,
you just choose
yeah,
the
that's really
diet.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. It's just, yeah, defining the goal, and then from there you'll know what is the route. Um, so thinking of like, I was just thinking of like some we'll transition to nutrition, because I think this is a whole podcast again.
Oh,
So
okay,
we'll have
yeah,
to we'll have to get you on again to talk about this. But I know we've got some time now. But if you could do one workout for the rest of your life, what would it be? and why?
I'm glad you said workout and not exercise, because if it was
Yeah.
exercise, that'd be quite difficult. But one workout,
Well, we all know it'd be chest anyway, so every day's pump
um,
day.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe in my earlier 20s, but yeah, not anymore.
No,
Um,
of course.
but it would definitely be sprinting, and I'm going to specify
Mm,
um, over 60 meters, 60-meter sprint.
okay.
Okay, because that's basically when I'm going to reach my top speed. I just love sprinting as a form of exercise. I really enjoy it. And if you think about how the body has evolved to move, it's optimized to move from A to B. It's optimized for locomotion. Anatomically, that is how we're structured.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
so if you think about, well, that's why we sort of, celebrate when a child walks their first steps, because it's associated with independence. They're able to stand on their own 2 feet and move from A to B. And it's obviously been a critical
yeah,
part in our evolution, like our survival. We have to obviously
yeah.
move from A to B to survive. So yeah, and every time I've prioritized some form of running, whether that's like longer distance running or sprinting in my training program, my body's always felt its best. Again,
Mhm,
moving the way that our bodies have evolved to move, which again is locomotion. Um, and I really enjoy sprinting in particular because it's the most intense form of locomotion, because obviously like you're
mhm.
moving at a much higher speed. Um, and so, yeah, I would say 60-meter sprint, um, back squat, just because I really enjoy back squat. And so if I was to choose a lower body exercise, it would be back squat. Um, Back squat in particular because it enables you to load up more weight, so that it's the more loadable option out of like all of
Mm.
the variations. Um, I would say dips and chin ups for the upper body, because
Those
those
big
variations
movements.
enable the shoulder to move freely. So it's really good for
Mm.
improving shoulder function, and you are moving your arms through or your shoulders through a relatively full range of motion. So like sort of getting your arms above your head and sort of pulling yourself up, and obviously dips, moving your arms way behind your body, and then performing that press. I think that would be a really well, if I could do, yeah, those 4 exercises for the rest of my life, um, actually, yeah, I'd be quite happy with that.
That's great. And I think now that you sort of, identified that, it's really helpful for people to think, right, if I haven't got those 4 things in my workout, then maybe I should think about including them.
Also,
One
sorry,
thing I would
I
say
say,
is, go on, yeah.
based upon that, if you did want to include that, but let's say you haven't, let's say sort of like you're in your 30s or 40s, you haven't sprinted since like you fucking left school, um, and like finished playing sport. It's probably not a good idea to just like, head out to your local park and sort of like and start sprinting, because you might pull a hamstring. Um, so like work up to it. Okay. Like try to, um, like figure out what the underlying qualities are that you need to build in order to perform that activity. Same with a back squat. Like the back squat isn't appropriate for everyone. Does
Mm,
like involve a decent amount of skill. So learn how to squat effectively first. Again, use something like a goblet squat, which is way easier, and then progress towards learning how to back squat effectively. Likewise with chin ups and dips, a lot of people don't, they're not capable of performing chin ups or dips. They're quite difficult, more advanced exercises. So yeah, develop the underlying qualities to perform those movements first, and then so like a dip could quite easily be scaled back to something like a push up or a chin up.
amazing.
Yeah, start with a lat pull down. Maybe you can do some eccentric chin ups where you're just lowering yourself down under control. But yeah, always like work towards um, performing a certain activity and spend plenty of time developing the underlying skills and characteristics that you need to perform it well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Get the building blocks.
Yeah.
So I know we're sort of coming towards the end of this show, and I really want to thank you for all your time today. It's been so insightful, and I think we definitely need you on again to really dive into these topics even further. So a way that I'd like to end some of these podcasts is that, so part of what I like to try and offer as my services and my community is called the art of fulfillment. So, and I think that fulfillment is an art. There is many different ways to it because art is subjective, and we have many different ways of approaching it. So I'd love to know, like, what is your definition or what is your idea of fulfillment?
Okay, I would say it's living in alignment with your values, regardless of the outcome.
Oh, I like that.
I think that's
Why? What?
truly what, yeah,
Yeah.
that's truly what defines success. And I think you can sleep easy at night if you live in accordance with your values.
And I really like the fact that you said without, regardless of the outcome.
Mhm.
What is the meaning behind that?
So you can achieve a certain outcome by deviating away from your values.
Mm,
You could sort of like, you
yeah,
can achieve what might be considered from somebody else's perspective as success. But if you abandon your values to achieve that outcome, then in my opinion, you haven't really succeeded. And it's probably gonna, um, it's not gonna feel as satisfying. Even if you do achieve that outcome, it's not gonna feel as satisfying as if you did the right thing and you stuck to your values.
having
I
that
mean, you can kind
integrity as part of the journey.
of exactly, yeah. I think that is what integrity is. It's sort of like, it is sticking to your values no matter what. Um, I mean, integrity, you could say, is like a value within itself. But I think if somebody was to sort of like write down their core values, um, I've never bothered including integrity because without integrity, all of those values are meaningless. So it's sort of
Mm,
like
yeah, yeah,
it has
yeah.
to be
It's like,
present.
yeah,
You're not going to stick to them, then there's no point doing it. But yeah, if you live in alignment with your values, but then regardless of the outcome, so like if you lie to get somewhere, um, and honesty is one of your core values, then
yeah.
yeah, it's you've violated your own values in order to get somewhere. So
Love that. Love that. Really, really insightful. I think that's, yeah, such a nice way of defining it. So, Charlie, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find more about you and learn more about your work?
yeah, so
Where can we follow you?
yeah, sort of like my coaching company is Work Hard, spelled WRKHRD, and so my Instagram handle's workhard.performance. So you can find me there. If you've got any questions around training, nutrition, fitness, anything like that, then feel free to drop me a message. I'm more than happy to help. Um, yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me. And yeah,
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So for everyone listening, we'll put those the links in the show notes so that, yeah, you can get in contact with Charlie and follow his journey. Yeah, just he's doing some amazing work with clients. Next time I'd love to hear more about the transformations that you've done. Like, I'm constantly seeing such good case studies that you are working with, and it's a really, it's inspiring for me to get back into my fitness a bit more as well. So yeah, really appreciate your time today. And yeah, hopefully we'll have another conversation down the line soon.
fantastic. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate. Speak soon. Bye.